Angie.
John.
I don't know if you noticed, but the world seems to be competing for most stressful headline of the week.
Right? It's like every time you refresh the news, you need to lie down. And meanwhile, coaches are supposed to just smile and ask, so what are your goals?
Exactly. It feels a bit off to talk about productivity hacks when half the planet feels like it's on fire. And yet that's the job, isn't it? People come to us for support, but they don't leave the chaos at the door.
Yeah. And that's where coaches either freeze, they fumble, or they find a way to actually hold space and still be useful, which is what we're going to dive into today. How to coach when big world events are happening.
Yeah, basically how to avoid being the coach equivalent of saying, don't worry, just manifest better vibes.
Okay, please, no toxic positivity here. Let's dig in.
Welcome to the Coaching Clinic with John and Angie.
The show for professional coaches who want to develop their skills and grow their business.
Follow the show on your favorite podcast app.
And join us every Wednesday for new episodes.
So Angie, it's just a fact of life that I think there's been a lot of big world events going on recently, a lot of big things in the news, but our clients don't leave the world at the door when they come into their coaching session. So whether it's pandemics, mass shootings, climate crisis, whatever is going on, it's stuff that can be playing on people's minds. So how do we deal with that? I mean, we have both coached people through the pandemic and through other things that have been going on in the world. And how do you deal with that with clients? Where do you even start to address that?
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because, my go-to with clients that are just say they've experienced something personal that's negative, right? Depending, I think we even touched on this a few times, but, if there was a death in the family and it was this morning and they want to show up for their 9:00 session, I'm the one that's like, whoa, right? We still need to honor ourselves while being responsible. And part of that is to protect ourselves. And right. So I think that's one side of the spectrum, but I feel like there's a bigger side. You and I have talked about this personally, the world seems to be, right? When the world is happening or events are happening, all of a sudden, it's just like there's something in the air. And you as a coach have to decide how to progress the same way you would if somebody came into a session with, some event that happened to them personally, while remaining, and this is we'll get to this, but huge for me as a coach, a huge awareness that I am human first also. And it can create so many levels to this topic, actually, right?
But the thing is, world events undoubtedly have the potential to derail someone's progress, whatever they're working on, derail a session completely, if there's something going on for a client. And I think it is important because I don't know about you, but I'm, saying last time we spoke, I'm Mr. Zen. I'm Mr. I generally don't let the world get to me that much. I have a very stoic philosophy kind of approach to life. And so I tend to take stuff as it comes and appreciate what's good in life and accept what's not, change what I can change and live with what I can't, because I don't see what else we can do. And I don't like spending my time and my life worrying. I have that. And I feel like I'm pretty centered in my inner peace most of the time. If I make the assumption that my clients also have that, that's unfair to them because there's a good chance that they don't, and stuff may be going on that is getting to them. So it is important to, I think we always have this temptation, it comes from theory of mind of, we need to understand that not everybody has the knowledge or the facilities, the emotional resources that we may have, and we may need to check in on that, and we can look for verbal clues, for body language clues, or sometimes it'll just be very plainly spoken. Something's on their mind. They'll seem distracted, and you may want to ask, is there something else going on for you?
For example, right? Mark the date, right? Today is September the 17th of 2025, and I've had in the last week or so several challenging sessions with clients. And those challenging sessions have forced me as a coach to at least re-examine my approach. So what does that mean for me at least at the onset of a coaching session? When things are going on, should I intentionally check in and say, hey, how are you today? Give in, right? Not maybe that's not how you would say it, but like, do I go in as a coach and talk about the elephant in the room or the elephant in the world? Or do I go on and business as usual with and I had this happen, which is why I'm bringing it up, when I did go in as, hey, how are you? Let's talk about the week. And my normal routine with this particular client, they were a little bit upset with me that I still wanted to go through their progress and kind of what, we talked about in the introduction today. So, right. And again, it was not a big deal. We worked through it and I shared my perspective, but it really opened my mind to, I really need to think about this. How do I want to approach somebody in a session if there is something, going on, right? We talked about coaching through COVID. And at that time, many people were just coming forward and going, oh my gosh, I know 3 families that have COVID now, and fear, major fear. Yeah. And it was a little bit challenging because as a coach, I think ultimately we don't want to feed into the fear or whatever the emotion is. But as we talked about in one of our most recent episodes, still holding space. And I'm being honest, with world events and things as they are, I'm rethinking my approach actively.
Yeah. I'll say this. I don't always do this, but I have done it a lot. And I tend to roll with my gut instinct on it when I do. And that is to sometimes ask a client, is there something going on for you or something you'd like to discuss before we get into what we come here to work on today, before we get into our main session. So I said, I won't do it 100% of the time, but I don't always get a sense of when I should. And whenever I do, sometimes it's just a couple of minutes of them saying, oh yeah, actually this is on my mind and this stuff's been going on this week. And so, and we can say, if relevant, say, all right, is that something you want to talk about today or shall we move into other things? And great, it could end up being your session if it makes sense to do that, but it might not. But I do think sometimes it's good to clear the space for them a bit and just say, all right, rather than feeling like you having to hold it and say, no, this thing's going on, it's driving me crazy. They've had a chance to express that. I was like, okay, well, we can maybe just put it to the side for a bit, or maybe we will actually make it the theme of today's session.
It's such a slippery slope. I'm being honest, because I agree with that. I do want to hold space and I don't want to pour into a cup of anger, negative, like whatever the emotion is. Unless, of course, it's positive. If somebody comes to a session and says, I'm a grandma or a grandpa, and I just, this morning, and I will do a check-in and say, well, do you need to be with family? And not because I'm letting them off the hook, so to speak, but, emotions are hard to override. I want to have and deliver the best, the very best session that I can. And I think it's something is personal and very individual depending on the client or how you handle things like that. When it's negative, it's much harder, I think, to navigate through. And I've also been forced. So you and I wear our coaching uniforms, if you will, with pride. We do. Mm-hmm. We're very proud of what we do and how we do it. We're always learning, looking to learn more, be better. And one of the things that I have carried very close to me is, as a coach, being as objective as I possibly can. So during the course of this particular week, I have been challenged in big ways. And I've been challenged in the past. Don't get me wrong. I've had people come in and, that have come in with ideals or sharing pieces of themselves that are in they're polar opposition of where I sit in a particular space.
Yeah.
And it's fine. And it's been fine. But like I'm saying, recently I've had some opportunities come forth that I'm like, ooh, why is this particular thing hitting me differently? And how do I, as a coach, remain objective for my client? I have to. Otherwise, I'm done. I'm dead in the water. And again, there might be people listening that are like assuming what they think they know. So don't do that, because you don't really know. But I'm putting this forward. I even suggested this to John as a topic because I'm feeling actively challenged as a coach, because I'm human before I'm any role. And I still want to be my highest and best self as a coach.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
I'll say this. I think in life, not just in coaching, in life, there's always a certain amount of pressure and expectation to show up or respond, react in a particular way. Mm-hmm. And when you respond with something like curiosity, when you have that sort of, oh, okay, that's interesting, tell me more, rather than someone who's expecting you to be shocked or stunned or whatever it is, you're not going into the emotion that they automatically went into, that they did. There's something's going to come up and say, oh, you're weird. Why aren't you doing what everyone else around me is doing? Mm-hmm. Probably because as a coach or someone in personal development, you've coached yourself out of it. You've trained yourself out of doing that because you don't want to go through your life being reactive. You want to have control. Was Tony Robbins calls it your personal power, right? You are in your personal power, so you get to decide your, not 100%, but you mostly get to decide your emotional state and decide how you want to be showing up, how you want to be reacting and responding in particular situations or to particular things. And sometimes when that doesn't happen for people, they think, oh, you're bloody weird. Don't like that.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you something. Do you have any, and this is a big question, I think this is for anybody who is becoming a coach, thinking of becoming a coach, is a veteran coach. But for you, I'm just asking you, right, in this moment, do you have any, and I don't say that I do or I don't, but do you have any like deep lines in the sand that will make you say, you know what? I need to step off and away from this because, okay, so I know this can be like ooey, sticky, murky, controversial. So don't come at us, people. We're just having a conversation. But are there any of those that you would be willing to share with me and our audience?
To a degree, and I'm probably going to keep it fairly general in how I discuss these, but I'm that I'm not religious. I'm not even really what you. I mean, other than that, I meditate and stuff. I'm not really what you'd even call spiritual.
But that's spiritual. Yeah.
I could be defined in the, but I don't think of myself that way. I don't really believe in the supernatural and stuff like that. Well, I'm open to it. I just don't have any evidence for it. And so, when if a client starts talking about their religious beliefs, or they start talking about their chakras, or they start talking about I don't know, I'm trying to think of other things, their aura or whatever. This is all stuff that I don't believe in, but it's not my job on the call to disabuse them of their belief, or to bring them round to bring them into rational. I shouldn't say it that way, but but
you did.
But it's not my job to rationalize their thoughts or to try and say, all right, you should be thinking this way. I'm there for them. And that's not what they've hired me for. And it's not even what I want to do. However, if for example, I had a client who was really anti-gay, homophobic, maybe that's tied into their religion or something like that. And one of their goals is wanting to criminalize homosexuality in their country or some other country. I can't work with that. I could not work with that. And so it could be to an extent as well that if somebody was supporting a war or regime that seemed like a big threat to the world, and they want to be actively promoting that and helping that to happen, I would have to step away because for me, that would be immoral. I could not be a part of that. So there are things that would cross the line for me, but there is also an extent.
Have you ever stepped away though? Let me ask you, have you ever had that experience where you have stepped away?
Yeah.
Oh, see, and that's the difference. I have not yet. And again, and that's what I think this is really about for me in bringing this up is, should we as coaches have some boundaries around ourselves, right? Should we? And my personal answer was no. And okay, I wasn't looking at it that way. So let me be clear. I wasn't saying to myself, like, what are my personal boundaries as a coach? That wasn't it. But because of certain things coming up and questions being, posed and things like that, I've taken a step back and said, I think I need to pay attention to this. And for me, I, like yourself, better late than never, feel like to be true to who I am as a coach, which is to be as objective as I can, to be efficient, effective, and all of the things that we think make a great coach and have made me a great coach, that I need to set some boundaries for myself and I need to have some lines in the sand. Now, I've had people that have shared things with me that I didn't agree with, but it didn't prompt me to want to maybe think or do things differently as a coach. I just took it as part of who they were as the whole and remain objective. But like yourself, I'm finding that there are some moral questions and ethical questions. And that doesn't mean that, I don't want to work with somebody because they don't believe what I believe. Don't misinterpret that. But if I'm being challenged in some way, I'm human before I'm a coach too. And although trained and learning how to manage ourselves and our emotions and things, it might be in my best interest to maybe create some of those boundaries, similar maybe to yours, right?
Yeah. Look, if you are someone who specifically wants to coach people who are Christian or people who are Islamic or people who are atheist, for example, you can definitely do that. That's going to be one of the things that you're going to be qualifying people in. But that should also be clear in your message and your marketing that that's who you're for. But when you're on the coaching, for me, there is only one instance I can think where I had to step away, and we didn't have to have a discussion about it. I just said, I'm not the coach for you. And, and I told the coaching company I was working with why. And this was due to homophobia. It's like homophobic things that were coming up on the call. It's like, I'm just not the right coach for you.
You're like, hey, you're going against everything that I am and I can't work with you. Sorry.
It wasn't just that though.
Yeah.
I would never be able to see that person's greatest potential because I would not be able to move past that. That's really more the issue. Is like, I can't get past that. I can't deal with, I can't accept that about you. And so I'm not going to be the right coach for you because I don't like this particular thing. And I would want to work on helping you to come out of that, to have a different perspective. And that's not what the coaching is actually for.
Right.
And in that situation as well, I didn't think there was going to be a right coach for them. We ended up giving them a refund. Because the company itself did not want to have a homophobic client, which is definitely a good thing.
And listen, and that's their choice and their right to have that. I don't know if you remember this from a while back. It just came to my mind. I did have a client many, many, many years ago that I was struggling with, and he was not from the US. It doesn't matter where he was from. But he did come from a background where women just weren't viewed equally. Let's just leave it at that. And I struggled. I struggled through like 6 or 7 sessions. And finally, and I was working, part-time with a company at the time. And that company said, let us listen to some sessions. And they kind of said to me, like, you realize that he's just not going to agree with you because you're a woman. And I didn't. I was like, really? He seemed game and energetic and willing to be vulnerable until we started doing the work. And what was happening was I was constantly being challenged. I would hang up from that 1-hour session, literally feeling like I was on the treadmill at high speed for 8 hours. I was mentally, physically, and emotionally drained. but I wasn't catching why. So this kind of maybe falls into that category of like, wait a second, so some things I think can be deeper. Some issues are deeper. Some people are just not coachable, and that's easier to identify. And I think it's easier for us as coaches to step away because there's a blame factor there, right? Like they're just not coachable at this time. I've left the door open. I've treated them professionally. But I think when it hits us at our core, right? Or in some personal way, I don't know, my daughter's a blonde. Make this up. If somebody was like, oh, yeah, I can't stand blondes. Blondes are the worst. They're so stupid. They're worthless. They should all be shot, killed, cooked, and eaten. I'm probably going to have to give myself permission to step away, right? Because I do not have the power. I might even say, really? So what brought you to that conclusion? I might be able to step into it for a second and coach through it, but do I want to?
Yeah, I would also, I would struggle to coach someone who had such regressive or bigoted views, regardless of the reason for them having that. If they were particularly misogynistic or racist or homophobic or whatever it is, I would not tolerate that in a coaching session. I wouldn't tolerate it from anybody, to be honest with you. I don't want to be around that. And so, yeah, I would remove myself from that situation. If I have to give someone their money back, I would. It generally doesn't happen, though. I guess people always have those senses of where those things are appropriate, where they're not. Maybe less so than they used to, but
well, that's the point, though, John. Yeah. That's the point. Is that I think this is coming up a little more because I think, listen, when you and I started coaching, I don't think the world was perfect and the people were perfect. No. But I think things have been changing dramatically in recent decade, right? In the last decade. And I noticed that within our industry, things are changing. I've seen a lot of people come into coaching because they have a mission. And like you said, well, then stay in that lane. And then I've seen a lot of people leave this, believe it or not, industry because they're like, I give up. I'm done. That's not going to happen for me. But again, as a coach and as somebody who's always looking to not just learn the next newest, greatest book, technique, etc., I also want to stay fully aware of who I am and, am I doing the best for me too, right? This is not a unilateral relationship with our clients. They don't just get permission to whatever. And I did. Like I said, I had a couple of spews in the last week and I was like, okay, I want to talk about this because I've never felt compelled to do so. I'm wondering how this episode's going to go in the ratings, but we've never really done anything like this where we've actually said, no. How do you handle everything as a coach?
Yeah, I'm okay with being presented with sometimes contrarian or challenging opinions. That's fine.
Love it.
But to a point, right? To a point. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes people want to provoke and poke the bear just for the sake of poking the bear. Sometimes people just want to see if they can shock you, if they can get that reaction. It generally doesn't happen with clients, though. I've not really had that experience, and I'd be interested to hear from coaches who have who've had clients sort of trying to get a rise out of them, because that's a sign of a bit of toxicity going on in that relationship, and probably not a good idea to continue unless you can straighten that out. But when there's big things going on in the world, particularly, you can't just pretend that they're not happening, but I don't want them to override everything that we're doing. I'll spend some time in it by all means, but I don't want it to take us away from the purpose of us working together. But if somebody has having an emotional reaction to that, I want them to have the emotional reaction, even if I think, they're a bit, I might think I might think it's too much, but then that's just me comparing it to how I would react and respond, which could be which we know is probably very different, a bit less emotional, a bit more controlled usually about where I want to be emotionally. I don't expect that of my clients. So people are going to go to where they're going to get to. But yeah,
well, wait, so here's
the right point here.
No, I think you are, but I think here's the thing, right? So my intention with bringing this topic into our podcast is really, I'm not looking to incite anybody, and I don't want anybody coming and at us like, oh, you said this and I'm this, and that's not what it is. I'm talking about being a coach and how it is very difficult for us sometimes to keep our humanness out of what we do. And, what I've kind of realized in the past week, and again, I keep mentioning that because they're just things that have happened and anniversaries of horrible things. And that's not what this is about. And what I realized is for those of you that have been listening to us from the very beginning, I shared that I once had a client that identified as a female genitalia. And I remember sharing with you that although it kind of like, it gave me pause because I didn't expect to hear it. And she asked me very straightforward, do you have any issue with that? And I said, no, but I have a question for you as well. And my question to her was, if you remember, so tell me how that affects the coaching journey that we're about to take. Because this was a very, very new client, session 1. And she says, oh, I don't know if it will. I said, okay, great. Let's move forward. So I would say that for me, in trying to make sure that, number one, I'm not going to let anybody bring me into their bullshit. I'm not. Even if they're like, oh, I'm so upset. Like, we don't do that as coaches, right? We need to take people out of their bullshit. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, before I decide, and I'm giving myself now permission as a coach to do this, before I decide to step away, I would kind of take the same positioning that I did with this other client, right? Because what she shared really had nothing to do with me. And not that I didn't care, but I'm like, okay. And I was actually kind of thinking like, wow, interesting. I was curious. So,
yeah.
Right? If I bring that forward, if somebody comes into a session and they're just like guns blazing, or they're at all kind of, combative or looking to just spew, I need to remain a coach in how I react. And my reaction is, so I understand, I'm hearing that this is how you feel. Okay, so let me ask you, how is this going to affect, does it have any real impact on what we're discussing today?
Yeah.
And go into the more, like, get out of their narrative and more into the coaching. Yeah. And if they do turn around and say, well, I'm just going to go out there and KILL, any blonde, then maybe we have nothing to talk about anymore. That's my decision. But how I approach it can still be uneventful, even if I'm feeling a little charged.
I think if I was in that same situation with having that client who said, I identify as a female body part, and I would probably take
genitalia specifically, please.
Yes. I would probably take much the same stance. So like, okay, well, sure. Yes. I would feel a little bit flawed at first, but I know I'd recover myself. And like, similarly to you, how's this going to impact our coaching relationship? Well, it's probably not. In my head, I'd be going, unless you're going to spend our sessions talking out of you know what.
Oh my gosh. Listen, I'm being honest, it did come up later. She was telling me about transcending, and I was very honest with her. I said, this is new. And I did share this in the first session. Like, just so you know, though, I've never worked with somebody that identified as this. So if I lose focus, or if I lack understanding in a particular point because of that, I need you to tell me that, because I lack experience there. Are you okay with that? So we had like a mutual understanding about, and it wasn't about my beliefs. It wasn't about politics, religion. It was none of that. And I don't believe that any of that belongs in a session when you feel like you as a coach could be incensed by something.
Yeah.
Other coaches that I've shared that with have shared with me, like, did you tell them to go boppity? No, I didn't do that, because that's their belief, not mine. And they weren't trying to impose it upon me.
Yeah, exactly. Like if a client told me that they were a flat earther, or I don't know, they believed in because they didn't believe the moon landing was real or something like that. And that, okay, again, does it affect our sessions?
Correct.
Probably not. Does it really? What impact does it really have on us? Unless the conspiracy theory rabbit hole is starting to impact your life in negative ways, which it definitely can do for people, then probably we don't need to spend too much time discussing it. I don't need to disabuse you of that. I don't agree with it, but there's this thing of, I generally don't think my clients should have the first clue what my personal beliefs are. Really?
We talked about that, right? What if people ask, hey, Angie, like, do you celebrate Christmas? Yes, I do. But that still, leaves much to be desired. And if they do ask, or if they become familiar or too curious, I just actively shut it down and say, you know what? Here's my plexiglass. You can see me, but you can't touch me. And I think that's important to keep it present no matter how long you work with somebody.
Yeah, and so if you can't switch off your own internal commentary or your own activism of that at appropriate times, you are going to be the one who derails your coaching sessions rather than.
Well, listen, isn't there the counter to this, right? Do you think there are not coaches that have very, hardcore, hard-nosed belief systems in whatever it is? I don't care if it's about, anteaters. I don't care what it is. Hardcore. It is not our place to impose that either. And you do have to be careful when you do come to realize, even in a benign way, that somebody's belief system, I don't believe. I don't know. I don't understand anything about identifying as a female. I don't get it. I don't support it, but I don't not support it. It's just not my belief play, my system.
There should always be this thing going on ahead of, is this relevant to our coaching? Do we need to get into this? And certainly if something has come out as saying for you, this is crossing a line for me, or this is like making me feel very uncomfortable as a coach, then you do need to address whether or not you can actually continue in the session or continue with that client potentially. But for the most part, that stuff shouldn't come up. It shouldn't really be happening that you're even trying to impose anything in sessions. I mean, I do think some of these coaches who do have very strong positions and stances and things, you generally would know that before working with them, I would imagine. If you've gone and found them, you're generally going to know that. There have been situations like, a coach mentor guy I was working with, definitely had some very politically different beliefs to me. However, it maybe did slightly change my opinion of him, but it didn't mean we couldn't still work together or that I didn't still respect his success or his knowledge and expertise. It was just something a little different. It didn't cause a rift because it didn't need to. But I think if there was a situation where you think it's okay to, like, you think it's someone who thinks it's okay to own people, or someone who thinks that people who are LGBT plus need to be unalived or something like that, we have a problem. We're not going to be able to see eye to eye, and we're crossing boundaries of, like, you and I we are in very separate worlds that are not going to mix. It's like oil and water. Yeah.
Listen, it's so interesting. And then I think I want to kind of trail off with this a little bit, because it is what we're talking about. There's going to be a million different sides and opinions to this. And you and I know that. And it's okay, because we welcome that. We're curious. We'd love to hear your feedback on this, or your experiences that maybe went really well and maybe some that didn't, because to me, that's just all part of becoming a better coach and better understanding. But like example, John and I work together professionally. We consider ourselves to be very good friends. We share things that you don't even want to know with each other. However, However, we also recognize that we come from, even as coaches, different backgrounds, different mannerisms. You're sitting here saying like, oh, I'm not very spiritual, even, like I believe in this and not this. And John knows I have a very deep faith in spirit, but we're still able to work together professionally. And I think because we still come to each other with curiosity and not judgment and not imposing. And I think that I'm bringing this up as a whole, because it's a season, right? It's like John said, it doesn't happen very often, but because it happened to me twice, I think that as coaches, we do have responsibilities or things that we need to stop. Even like, because these things don't happen very often, maybe, that we kind of still need to be prepared for when it does. And this is just a season. It happened to me twice this past week, which is why I wanted to bring it up today and gain some perspective.
For me, some of this ties in with professionalism as well.
Yeah.
Because as much as I might say on an episode like this, I'm not really very spiritual, you probably wouldn't hear me say that on a coaching call. It's not really going to come up, especially if my client's talking about their deep faith and something like that. I'm going to listen. I'm going to take it on. I don't have to share their belief to be able to work with them.
Correct.
And coach them.
Yes.
So it's definitely important, and I do also think your clients don't need you to believe exactly what they believe either. They just need you to be that person holding the space, asking the questions, listening actively. And sometimes you might just need to acknowledge with them something that's going on. Check in with them. What's on your mind? Is anything coming up for you? Especially if you can see some agitation or distraction going on for them, and get it out there. Let them say what they need to say. But if you join them in that,
right? Like, well, here's the thing, right? Like I said earlier, we don't want to contribute to whatever the negative is. And I just think that what I would love to ask our listeners for is this is about, like, do you have any lines in the sand as a coach? Just curious, because I never have. And I mean, maybe I don't know that I have, but generally I haven't had to even consider that. So I'm just curious as to anybody else that has had experiences with that, how they manage it, navigate it. Questions for us about more of this.
If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment, and we'd love to.
I love that. All right.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, good stuff, Angie. Let's come back next time, and we'll pick something maybe a bit less controversial.
Oh, John, come on. Once in a while, you have to throw some pepper in the sauce.
I agree. All right, see you next time.
Bye for now.
Do you have a question for the coaching clinic?
Reach out on LinkedIn to connect with Angie and John.
Leave us a voicemail or video message, and we will feature you on the show.
You can also leave up to 90-second voicemail for free on www.speakpipe.com/the Coaching Clinic podcast.
We'd love to hear from you.
See you next time.
Bye for now.